Sometimes, the most important vows you make are the ones you keep to yourself. I had always imagined my wedding eve would be bathed in soft candlelight, surrounded by laughter, and filled with the sweet anticipation of a new chapter. My dress hung in the next room, a masterpiece of silk and lace that had taken months to perfect. The flowers were already being arranged in the cathedral. My heart should have been light, but instead, it felt heavy, like a stone sinking in. Deep water. My name is Elena Marquez. To the outside world, I was the lucky one, the girl who went from a modest background to marrying Daniel Roth, the charismatic CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. We were the power couple everyone talked about, his success, my charity work, our whirlwind romance. The magazines called us destined. But destiny, I was about to learn, has a dark sense of humor. That night, I wasn't supposed to leave. My maid of honor, Lily, had just finished helping me rehearse my vows when I remembered something: the engraved silver watch Daniel's late father had given him. It was meant to be worn on the most important day of his life, and Daniel had left it at my apartment. It was a small thing, but I wanted to surprise him. The hotel staff knew me well. Daniel and I had hosted countless charity galas there. I didn't even think to call ahead. I simply told the concierge I wanted to deliver something to Daniel's suite. As I stepped onto the plush carpeted hallway of the 18th floor, I heard the faint hum of music and the deep rumble of male laughter. I smiled at first, picturing him telling one of his over-the-top stories. Then I heard my name. She's perfect for the brand. A voice said. Another voice, Daniel's, followed, light with amusement. Exactly. She makes me look grounded, stable. Investors eat that up. My smile froze. But you're not actually going through with forever, right? Another man asked. Daniel laughed. Of course not. She's a phase, a sweet, manageable phase. Something inside me cracked. I don't remember putting down the watch. I only remember standing there, invisible in the hallway, as the man I thought I knew revealed a truth sharp enough to slice through every dream I'd built. Most people might have turned and walked away, but as I stood there, a strange calm took over me. I realized this wasn't just about me. This was about the image he sold to the world. The lies that would continue to hurt others if I stayed silent. And right then, I decided my wedding day would not be the start of our forever. It would be the end of his facade. The morning of my wedding began with sunlight pouring through the tall windows, painting golden streaks across the room. It should have been a beautiful moment, the kind people dream about, the kind you capture in photographs and frame for a lifetime. But I felt none of it. Instead, I sat at the edge of my bed, still in my robe, watching the steam curl from my untouched cup of tea. Lily came in, humming as she carried my veil. It's perfect, she said, holding it up to the light. You're going to take his breath away. I forced a smile. The kind that doesn't quite reach your eyes. My phone buzzed with messages. Friends sending love. Relatives confirming their seats. My mother's voice message played softly. Remember, Mija, this is your day. Make it unforgettable. Unforgettable. The word struck something deep inside me. I thought of the night before. The voices I had overheard, the way Daniel's laughter had sounded so confident, so certain that his world was unshakable. I thought about how many people would stand in that church today believing in a story that wasn't real. I thought about the girl I had been when I met him, hopeful, open-hearted, and how I could not let her be erased without a fight. There's a moment before a storm when the air feels still, heavy, almost expectant. That's how it felt inside me. While Lily busied herself arranging the veil, I walked to my desk and opened the small leather journal I kept hidden in my drawer. It was filled with letters I had written to myself over the years, reminders of who I was before the world tried to define me. On the first page, in my own handwriting, were the words, "Your truth will always be stronger than their lies." And that's when the plan began to form, sharp and clear. I would not confront him in private. I would not run away quietly. The world would hear the truth from me, in the place where he had expected only my vows. I could already see it, the stunned faces, the silence thick enough to feel, and me, standing tall. Voice steady, no tears, not a scene of destruction, but a declaration of freedom. The more I thought about it, the more certain I became. This wasn't revenge. It was release for me, for anyone who had ever been misled, for the version of myself who had once believed that love required silence. In the face of betrayal. By the time the makeup artist arrived, I had already rehearsed the words in my mind a dozen times. She brushed a warm pink across my lips and told me I looked radiant. I wondered if she could sense the fire building behind my calm expression. Each hour that passed brought me closer to that moment. Guests would soon take their seats. The music would begin. The world would watch a bride walk down the aisle, and they would expect to witness a promise. But they had no idea they were about to see something far more powerful. The church bells began to ring, each chime echoing through the crisp afternoon air. As the long black car pulled up to the grand stone steps, my hands rested in my lap, fingers entwined, but my heart was steady in a way that surprised me. For all the chaos swirling beneath the surface, I felt anchored, as though the choice I had made the night before had given me a kind of unshakable clarity. Lily reached over and squeezed my hand. "This is it," she whispered, eyes shining with excitement. She had no idea that her words meant something entirely different to me. The doors opened, and a burst of cold air swept into the car, carrying with it the faint scent of lilies from the arrangements. Inside, my dress shimmered as I stepped out, the beaded train catching the light. Cameras flashed from the guests already waiting outside. Smiles everywhere, hands waving, voices calling my name. They saw a bride about to marry the love of her life. I saw a stage perfectly set for the truth. Inside, the music was soft and elegant, the kind that drifts through a place like a gentle promise. Guests filled the pews, turning to watch as I began my slow walk down the aisle. Every step felt deliberate, like I was moving not just toward the man at the altar, but toward the moment that would change everything. Daniel stood there in his tailored suit, looking every bit the man the world admired. His smile was perfect, rehearsed. To anyone else, it might have looked warm and genuine, but I could see the flicker in his eyes, the same one I had seen when he charmed investors, the one that belonged to a man who could play any role flawlessly. My father figure, Miguel, took my arm a little tighter. "You're glowing," he whispered. I smiled at him, a real smile this time, not because of Daniel, but because I knew I was about to honor myself in a way that mattered more than any wedding ever could. We reached the altar. Daniel took my hands, his touch familiar yet suddenly distant. The officiant began the ceremony, his words weaving through the air, but my mind was focused, counting the beats until it was my turn to speak. I glanced out at the sea of faces, friends, family, reporters who had been invited to cover what was supposed to be a celebration of love. Somewhere near the front, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize, sitting alone. Her eyes were locked on Daniel, and for just a second, I saw something in them, a story, perhaps, of her own. It strengthened my resolve. The officiant's voice grew softer as he reached the point where I would recite my vows. Daniel's smile widened, certain he knew what I would say. I took a deep breath. Instead of turning to face him fully, I turned slightly toward the crowd. My voice was calm, steady, but every word carried weight. "I came here today to stand before the people I love most," I began. "I came here ready to promise my life to someone I believed was honest, loyal, and true. But sometimes, the truth comes to us when we least expect it. And when it does, we have a choice to look away or to face it." There was a shift in the room, a ripple of uncertainty. Daniel's smile faltered just slightly. My heart didn't race. My voice didn't tremble. I knew exactly what I was about to do. And I also knew this was only the beginning. A hush fell over the church so suddenly that I could hear the faint rustle of fabric. As guests shifted in their seats, my words hung in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. I kept my eyes on the crowd, feeling the weight of their anticipation press against me. "I learned something last night," I continued, my voice carrying across the vaulted ceilings. "Something that turned the man I thought I knew into someone I could no longer recognize. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it." I could feel Daniel tense beside me, the grip of his hand tightening around mine. "Elena," he murmured, low enough that only I could hear, "this isn't the time." But it was exactly the time. I let go of his hand and stepped forward, my train gliding behind me like a silver river. My gaze swept the crowd, pausing on each face, allowing them to feel the weight of what I was about to say. Many of you came here today believing in a love story, I said. You believed in it because I believed in it. I told you it was built on trust, respect, and honesty. I told myself that, too. But last night, I learned that trust is meaningless when it's not shared, respect is hollow when it's one-sided, and honesty, well, honesty disappears the moment it becomes inconvenient. Murmurs began to ripple through the pews. Someone in the back coughed. Someone else whispered my name. I took a slow breath, making sure my voice stayed calm. I was supposed to read vows today, words I spent weeks crafting. But those vows were meant for a man who doesn't exist, not the one who stood in a room with his friends last night and spoke of me as if I were nothing more than a phase, a prop, a convenient accessory for his image. Gasps echoed through the room. I didn't flinch. I reached into the bodice of my gown and pulled out a folded piece of ivory paper. My original vows. For a moment, I simply held it between my fingers. I could read these to you, I said softly, but they would only honor a lie. And I won't honor a lie on what should be the most truthful day of my life. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the crowd as though searching for a way to stop this. But the momentum was no longer his to control. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, I said. And I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here to make a choice for myself. For the woman I was before all this, and for the woman I'm going to be after I walk out of here. I let the paper fall from my hand. It drifted down slowly, almost gracefully, landing on the marble floor with a faint sound that seemed louder than it should have. I will not marry a man who cannot see my worth, I finished, my voice steady and sure. And I hope that if any of you ever face a moment like this, you will choose truth over comfort, no matter how hard it is. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the whispers began to grow, people turning to one another, some shaking their heads, others nodding slowly. And in that moment, I knew something. This wasn't the collapse of my life. It was the opening chapter of the life I was meant to live. The air outside the church was colder than I remembered, crisp enough to sting my lungs when I breathed it in. The ornate doors closed behind me with a deep, echoing thud, sealing off the murmurs and gasps that had filled the ceremony moments before. I stood at the top of the stone steps, looking out at the street where the world was still moving as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. Cars rolled past, a bus hissed to a stop on the corner. Somewhere, a street musician's guitar strummed a lazy tune. For the first time in months, I felt weightless. Lily burst through the doors a moment later, her heels clattering against the stone. "Elena," she said, her eyes wide, breathless. What just happened?" I smiled faintly, though it wasn't the polite smile people knew me for. This one carried steel beneath it. "The truth," I said simply. She stared at me for a long moment before shaking her head in disbelief. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." I didn't feel brave. I felt awake. A small group of guests trailed out behind us, some hesitant, some curious. A few avoided my gaze, but others gave me quiet nods. The kind of nods that said, "I understand more than I can say right now." That was when it hit me. What I had done wasn't just for me. People saw themselves in my choice, even if they didn't say it out loud. The driver opened the car door for me, expecting to take me back to the hotel, but I shook my head. "Not yet." My voice was steady. "I need to walk." So I did. Down the street, past the corner cafe where Daniel and I had once spent rainy afternoons, past the boutique where I had bought my engagement dress. With every step, the memories clung for a moment before falling away like leaves shaken loose in the wind. By the time I reached the small park 3 blocks away, I could hear my phone vibrating nonstop inside my clutch. Calls, messages, news, alerts. The story was already spilling into the world. A bride who walked away at the altar, leaving a groom in stunned silence. I knew it would spread. I also knew people would twist it, question it, try to reframe it in ways that made them comfortable. But I had no intention of hiding from any of it. I sat on a weathered bench beneath an old elm tree and let the sound of the city wash over me. Somewhere nearby, A child's laughter rang out. An older couple strolled by, hand in hand. Life was still moving, still breathing, still beautiful. A woman I didn't recognize approached slowly, almost hesitant. She was around my age, maybe younger, with a wool scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. "I saw what happened," she said quietly. "I was in the church. I left someone once, too. Not like that, but I wish I'd had the courage to say it out loud." Her words stayed with me long after she walked away. Maybe this was more than an ending. Maybe it was a beginning, not just for me, but for others who had been silent for too long. I pulled out my phone and opened a blank post. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before I began typing. Not an explanation, not an apology, just a truth I had lived. Your worth is not up for negotiation. Walk away from anything that asks you to forget it. I hit share, and somewhere inside, I knew this was the first step toward something far bigger than I had imagined when I walked down that ** by the next morning. The world knew my name for a reason I hadn't planned, but one I didn't regret. Headlines appeared on news sites. Morning talk shows replayed snippets of shaky cell phone footage from the ceremony, and strangers flooded my inbox with messages. Some were shocked, others curious, but most were filled with words I hadn't expected. Gratitude. They weren't just talking about a bride who walked away. They were talking about a woman who chose herself. I sat at my kitchen table, still in my robe, scrolling through message after message. A teacher from another state, who had left a toxic engagement, wrote, "You reminded me that walking away is still a kind of victory." A young man I'd never met said, "You gave me the courage to be honest with someone before I hurt them." Even people who didn't share details simply wrote, "Thank you for showing us it's possible." It struck me then, what had started as an act of survival had turned into a signal fire, one that others could see from far away. I met with Lily later that week at a small cafe tucked in a quiet corner of the city. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, watching me with that half-smile she always wore when she was proud but trying not to say it. "You realize you've become something bigger than this story, right?" she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Bigger, you're not just the bride who walked away. You're the voice people didn't know they needed. And you can either let this moment fade, or you can build something from it." Her words stayed with me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, staring at the same leather journal I'd opened on my wedding morning, the one filled with reminders of who I was before everything. Slowly, an idea began to take shape. What if I created a space where people could tell their stories? Not just about broken engagements or betrayal, but about every kind of courage it takes to choose yourself. What if I turned this single, defining moment into a platform for others to find their strength within a month? I launched an online community. The first post was my own story, not sensationalized, not edited to make it prettier, just the truth. Then the messages started to pour in. People from different countries, different ages, different lives, all writing about the moments they had chosen honesty over comfort, self-worth over approval. It grew faster than I expected. Journalists wanted interviews. Colleges invited me to speak. Even organizations I'd admired for years reached out, asking if I'd collaborate on campaigns about empowerment and resilience. But the most powerful moments weren't on stages or in interviews. They were in quiet, one-on-one conversations with people whose voices shook as they told me what they'd walked away from and how they'd found something better waiting for them. One night, after speaking at a small community event, a teenage girl approached me. Her hands trembled as she held out a folded note. "I was going to give up," she whispered. "But then I heard your story, and now I think I can try again." I carried that note home with me and placed it in my journal, because that was the real legacy of what happened in that church, not the headlines, not the speculation, but the chain reaction it started. I had thought I was burning down a single chapter of my life, but in truth, I had lit a torch that others could see in their own darkness. And maybe that's what choosing yourself really means, not just walking away from what's wrong, but walking toward something that can light the way for others.